touch base there. Let's welcome in Jenny, TD Ameritrade Network contributor Jenny Horns joining us now. Let's talk some Wayfair here, Jenny, because over maybe the last 6 months, this chart isn't as impressive as it once was maybe a year ago, but man, this stock has been a huge outperformer since the beginning of the pandemic, and really since before the pandemic. It's up over 200%, but losing some of that momentum as of late.
Definitely, but it is up slightly, almost 1% today, and it's up over 4% this week and 5% for this month. So like you mentioned, it has seen some sluggishness as we kicked off 2021. But if you look at a longer term chart, it hit lows of about $21.70 a share and then rose to as much as $369 a share, which is just insane. So now it's trading at about $312, which is still 14 times its low of $21 a share. So really, really interesting price activity with Wayfair, just, of course, due to the surge in pandemic, and Wayfair operates solely online, which made it a huge winner over the last year. Now, the stock did see a pretty decent bounce following its first quarter earnings at the beginning of May. They reported their revenue jumped about 50% year over year. Now, however, starting next quarter in the second quarter, which they won't report until August 5th, they'll be up against much more challenging growth comps, with revenue soaring as much as 84% in the early months of 2020 due to this pandemic. So it's just really hard for this company to sort of keep with that growth trajectory. Now, they did forecast already lower second quarter revenue and full year 2021 revenue. But what I thought was the most interesting part of their first quarter earnings call is the CEO said the pandemic will actually fundamentally change the amount of money consumers are willing to spend online, specifically for home goods. So he believes this is really a secular trend that is here to stay. And a lot of this, is, I think, we're seeing kind of now, and we're still seeing spending remaining actually higher than pre-pandemic levels, even in areas where the economy is virtually reopened. So I think that is a very good sign for Wayfair. Plus, it has this degree of stickiness we often talk about with these pandemic winners. It's seeing its repeat customers coming back. In fact, in the first quarter, repeat customers accounted for about 75% of their total orders. So that is huge. I mean, the fact that 75% of people continue purchasing on Wayfair shows it has built sort of this degree of a loyalty over the last year. And like I mentioned earlier, this is really a pure play for e-commerce and retail, which I think gives it a leg up. It has now 33 million active customers, which is up 57% from last year. And if you consider that these are often repeat customers, you could say that this story will continue, to be positive for Wayfair, with its growth expected to continue. Now, for 2022, they are only expecting growth of about 20%. And it's sort of ridiculous, I say only, because 20% annual growth is super healthy. It's just lower than the 50% they saw over the last year. And analysts actually are believing this trend will benefit other home improvement retailers like a Home Depot, a Lowe's, an At Home, and RH, because now people just want to invest more in their homes. It's sort of, brought about this trend that the CEO mentioned is here to stay, which brings me to our first tweet today, which sort of lists some of these e-commerce winners over the past few months, which says the top 10 U.S. companies ranked by retail e-commerce sales in 2021. Amazon, Walmart, eBay, Apple, Best Buy, Target, Home Depot, Kroger, Costco, and at number 10 is Wayfair. So a few of these are obvious, Amazon, Walmart, Target, but then there's the names that sort of emerged in the last year that I would have said, eBay, Best Buy, Wayfair even, I would have, they didn't really get the same amount of coverage as some of these other names. But being that Wayfair and eBay, they all operate solely online, they were really positioned so well for exactly what happened over the course of the last year. Now, of course, the concern is, how will they ever compete with the last year? I don't think they necessarily have to. They just have to consistently grow, which is what our next speaker focuses on. And he believes that they actually can still continue to grow over the long term. He says, the online home goods market is still in the early stage. In the US, the total addressable market is $450 billion, but only 20% of spend is online. The worldwide total available market is $840 billion, and Wayfair is in the process of expanding into international markets, which they have the supply chain to ship to. So supply chain has been obviously a huge issue for some of these e-commerce dependent companies. Like we've seen in Peloton, they just have a backlog they really couldn't handle. Now, what separates Wayfair is Wayfair has had strong logistics in place for now years, since they are solely online. So many are saying that they actually have the right tools in place. And I actually did some due diligence. I went on their website. My barometer for shipping on time is always how fast will a couch get to me? And they actually have no shipping delays, and they have free shipping on couches, which is just a thing in itself. But that just goes to show that they really have been able to keep up with the demand, which is sort of amazing. And I mean, some companies right now, you can't order a couch on RH that won't be delivered to you for 3 or 4 months. So the fact that Wayfair is sort of able to handle this supply and demand, to me, is a very, very good sign moving forward, Kevin.
Yeah, growth and acceptance, Jenny, right, is the most important thing for this company. I mean, they have to, right now as they sit, they have 11,000 global suppliers. They have 14 million items that they sell. And so the amount of people, on Wayfair that are looking at these items, it just keeps growing and growing. And so this is, Jenny, like you said, this is a company at the beginning of its life. Right? This is not a mature company. They are still growing. So some of the numbers aren't as important as the growth numbers. And the growth numbers are there. The stock's still going to be a little volatile, Jenny, but as you pointed out, this is a company that's doing nothing but growing and getting more and more accepted as people buy online, all the things that you would normally go in a store like to RH and things like that. Now they're doing it online. And again, that word that we talk a lot here, stickiness. Jenny, it's happening here, guys.
Yeah, and I mean, really, trends just couldn't have favored a company more. You look at the home improvement trends we've monitored over the last year and a half, and of course, the e-commerce trends goes without saying. So really a company in the right place at the right time, absolutely, and it shows in the stock price. But Jenny, great setup here for us. Thanks for joining us here this week, and we'll have a great weekend. We'll look forward to talking to you again next week. As we say goodbye to Jenny, I want to welcome in Megan Brantley, the VP of Research at LikeFolio.com, to continue the conversation around Wayfair here. And we're going to do a little bit comparison, Megan, as well, to some of these other companies as Wayfair, the kind of new age, only online versus some of these big players. How's things shaping up?
Yeah, so this is a fun one because I think it was even maybe 2 years ago we were bringing this name to you guys and we were saying, this is something that we're watching in e-commerce. This is a name experiencing just huge demand growth from consumers. We were watching purchase intent mentions skyrocket, and we were watching, Lowe's and Home Depot, some of these bigger names. They were unable to really keep pace with this huge growth that we were seeing out of Wayfair. And now it's kind of, a shifting the turntables. So you've got now Lowe's and Home Depot that are showing a little bit of this quarter-over-quarter growth. We saw pretty strong reports out of both of these companies earlier this week, and we saw especially a nod to this omni-channel fulfillment method. So the idea that you can purchase on something online and then pick it up in store. There's a huge demand from the consumers for this curbside pickup or this same-day delivery, and now we're starting to see that translate and actually kind of be a negative for Wayfair, if you can imagine. So when you look at this chart, we like to bring these grids to you guys because it shows the outperformers or the underperformers, and you can see Wayfair is on the more bottom left side of that chart. So we're seeing consumer sentiment is now falling lower where it used to be far superior, and we're seeing quarter over quarter purchase intent mentions actually start to fall. And so this is just something that previously this has been such a huge winner. This has been, we've been recording explosive growth, and now things are shifting. So this is one where we like to, bring this to the table and say, okay, this is something to keep an eye on. If you are an investor, this is a shift that we're detecting really, really early on, and it's something to watch moving forward.
Yeah, Megan, this is interesting because, to break it down for our viewers, when you look at a purchase intent versus sentiment chart that you guys bring now, it's extremely popular and it's real easy, right? You're looking for top right, you're not looking for bottom left. And even though it looks like the growth is fine, the purchase intent percentage changes looks like horrible, right?
Yeah.
The lowest of the four competitors. So what is happening to this company that this has fallen off? Why aren't they further left and higher right?
I think that one thing has to do with just these growth rates are slowing down. I think a little bit of this is expected that, Jenny mentioned even it's really hard to keep pace with the rapid growth that they had last year. However, Home Depot and Lowe's also had really strong years, and we're not seeing the same thing out of these peers. So one thing that we look at specifically is sentiment. So we've actually seen a pretty steep sentiment drop in the last year. It's fallen about 12 points, and a lot of this has to do with delays. A lot of this has to do with poor customer service mentions. Whenever you look at shipping times and you compare, consumers, we've gotten really spoiled. So I know I've ordered from Wayfair before, and it took a couple weeks for my chairs to come in. I realized I needed a deck box, and I said, I'm not waiting a couple weeks. I'm just going to go run by Home Depot or Lowe's and get what I need. And so I think that this is actually one of those scenarios where it almost reminds me of how we used to talk about Amazon and Target and Walmart all of a sudden having this competent competition. And we're seeing that out of Home Depots and Lowe's, that now they're able, they have the e-commerce element, but they also have that same day delivery or that in-store pickup that you get that instant gratification. And you can see here on the chart, whenever this peak COVID surge that we witnessed, this high volume, that's the big hill that you see. That was when people were, going online, they're ordering things for their house, and they had a little bit of trouble keeping up with that surge in demand. Things started to normalize, and now we're seeing it fall again just in the last couple of months. And so this is a little bit concerning, and that's kind of, that's why we bring this to you guys, is whenever we see shifting sentiment like this, you're looking at essentially, Jenny nodded to how important this loyal customer base is that comprises about 75% of their sales. Well, if you're not making your customers happy, how long are they going to stay loyal? So this is something that we're just, we want to get ahead of, and we're picking up on this, I think, really early on for Wayfair. And we're definitely, watching this really closely moving forward.
And Megan, this is also as the tides kind of begin to turn and the country and the world open up to more kind of in-person shopping trends. And at some point, especially if you're someone who doesn't want to put something together with a million pieces, I'd imagine kind of assembly options are going to be easier from something like a Home Depot or a Lowe's that maybe have a brick and mortar presence. And you start thinking about some of that. The true only e-commerce was, of course, there was a huge boom of that throughout the COVID period. But as we trend back towards a new normal or a more normal, where you kind of have a hybrid between the two, maybe more e-commerce than before, there's still a place for brick and mortar. That obviously doesn't favor Wayfair either. So although they've grown substantially, it sounds like the experience has gotten worse. And this is at a time where some of its competitors' experience maybe are improving. Is that kind of the message?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. This is a really important, I think, inflection point for Wayfair and a real test to see, can they keep these loyal customers around? Right now, our data is definitely shifting into a more bearish lens. I think that there's time for Wayfair to right its ship, but we'd like to see some improvement in sentiment, and we've definitely got a close eye on that outlier grid, because if demand keeps falling at that pace for Wayfair, while we see peers in the space trend the other direction, that's definitely not a good sign.
And so last thing here before we let you go for the weekend here, Megan, kind of a bonus one. What you have, if you have something here on Home Depot, post earnings now, the stock's certainly much lower. Some of that incredible price action that we've seen. From a LikeFolio standpoint, when you look at a name like Home Depot and you kind of contrast it with what you're just talking about with Wayfair, if you had to pick a name in this space, is Home Depot closer to the top of that list, the middle, or the bottom?
I would say Home Depot is definitely up there, and I will say that we did put out a bullish note on Lowe's as well this week following that report. So I think that we really like how things are setting up for both of those companies and the shift that they're making in the omnichannel space moving forward.
Good stuff. Megan, always a pleasure. Megan Brantley, the VP of Research at LikeFolio.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll look forward to talking to you again next week. Have a great weekend.